That's our cue. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming. My name is Shannon Gilligan, and I am the current publisher of Choose Your Own Adventure. And I was also originally an author, and actually I became involved with Choose Your Own Adventure in 1981 when I was hired for the then absolutely unheard of job of project manager adapting 2 of the books into Atari console games. Which not many people know about. Anyway, back then there wasn't a thing like there was no job description. My college actually invited me back when they heard what I was doing, just to explain to like the outgoing seniors, like, yeah, there's this world out there called, you know, game software, and like you can work in it and earn a living and all that. So I got quite involved in that work, and then started to write some books, and had a very interesting interlude in the early 90s when I was evangelized by Apple. Does anybody know about evangelism, that program? Has anybody heard of it? It's a tragic shame. It was a very visionary program that Steve Jobs started, and sort of in the late 80s, and they would reach outside of, I mean, at that point I was firmly an author. That was what I was doing, and Apple would reach out to people outside of technology to create software, thinking that that would act as a bridge for like non-technical people, because there were a lot of people in the world that really didn't use computers, and nobody used the internet except, you know, hardcore geeks at places like MIT and Harvard and, you know, places like that that, you know, had access to military, of course. Anyway, in 1990, in the very last generation of evangelism, Apple reached out to me, and it was very interesting. They didn't give you money, but they gave you every other form of support. They gave you machines, they gave you names of programmers, they gave you access. I mean, you could, you're evangelist. And I sort of love the religious overtone of this language, right? And this is straight from Jobs, who was religious about technology, as we know. But, so your evangelist would actually, anything you needed in the course of developing, software, they would try to help you. So my evangelist, for instance, found me multiple engineers. They found me somebody in Hollywood that I could afford to score my games. Just anything you needed. And then they helped you get the game in front of audiences at things like, PAX West did not exist then, but at things like that, at Apple World, or, you know, so yeah, it was a great era. And unfortunately it stopped right after the group of people that I was with. I developed some games, mostly mystery games, on CD-ROM, and then got involved in the internet. And, you know, one day when I was, you know, bent over my labors, my husband, Ari Montgomery, came in and said, Bantam just called, and they're letting all the rights revert and the trademark rights. And we were like, whoa. So a few years later, after fielding a lot of offers, we decided that we would go ahead and publish it ourselves. So there's some important sort of history about Choose Your Own Adventure. It really was designed as a stealth reading program. Ray's background was as an educator, and Ed Packard, the other co-founder of the series, he had been a lawyer but a writer, and they had both worked on interactive storytelling. Ray actually designed an early RPG for industry. It was called the Energy Environment Game, and it was published in 1971. And it was out of a think tank in Boston called Clark Apt Associates. And if you research early RPGs, it is often mentioned. We have one precious copy left. And it was designed for high school classrooms to teach kids about like fossil fuel limitations. Anyway, so with all that in the stew, in 2005, we decided we would just publish it ourselves because we could not get the support from a traditional publisher to bring the series out with gusto. And here I am, like 19 years later, and almost 20. We actually, our first season was spring of 2006, relaunching the series. And we have about 150 different titles in print We've licensed a couple of tabletop games. We have a tarot deck, kind of going full speed ahead. We love PAXs. We have only discovered them in the last year and a half. We did PAX Unplugged for the first time last year. And the Venn diagram overlap of fans of Choose and attendees of PAX is like 100%. So we love it's just so lovely to get so many people coming up to the booth and telling me about like how Choose impacted their life. And it's also fabulous to get a kid and like a new fan. One new fan gave me his unicorn sticker yesterday. I know, like you can't make this up. It's just so great. I wish I was just quickly looking for a PowerPoint, like to kind of go through the history of it. Because I was presenting last month in San Diego, but I wasn't able to locate it quickly. I thought I was going to be sitting around in a circle with about 12 kids. I'm sorry. I have to read to little people about like making choices and all that. So really what I'm here to do today is read a little bit of a book, one of my books. And I can give you a choice. This is what's left. We're getting sold out. We didn't ship enough. So I've got Case of the Silk King, a personal favorite, and Struggle Down Under, which was eerily prescient. I wrote this about, and terrorism is one of the subplots, and I wrote it in the early 90s, and it's creepy how accurate it turned out to be. That, like, I think, right? That, like, guesstimating sort of where the world was going. Gentler times. So, want to choose? Anybody? Okay, who wants Case of the Silk King? Struggle Down Under. Oh God, it's sort of even.
Let's just go through both of them really quickly.
What would you say?
Let's do them both quickly.
Okay, we'll do both really quickly.
Let's die really quickly.
I'll try. We're wearing warning. You and you alone are in charge of what happens in this story. You guys know that preamble, right?
Yeah.
Multiple choice, multiple ending. Okay.
Oopsie. Okay. Scooch this closer.
It's March 26, 1982. Wow, this goes way back. Okay. You sit at your desk reading the morning papers. You keep up with the news because you find current events fascinating, but it is also important for your work. As an uninformed detective, especially with international cases, it is hard to be a good detective. You know that President Ronald Reagan has made a strong statement. I know. You know that President Ronald Reagan has made a strong statement about the recent Russian offensive in Afghanistan. As you browse through the paper, God, this is such a throwback. Sorry. I don't read my own stuff that often, right? Like, that's not what I choose when I go home on a weekend. You know, oh yeah, I'll pull out Case of the Silk King. Nothing to read this weekend. No, that is not my problem. Okay. You know that, okay, so as you browse through the paper, you see an article, quote, 15th anniversary of the disappearance of the Silk King, unquote. There aren't many kings left in the world, and that one you hadn't heard of. Plain? You look up as the screen door snaps. It's Sam, your assistant, carrying several pieces of mail. Anything interesting, you ask? Just this, he replies, handing you a plain brown envelope. You look the envelope over. The address of your detective agency has been neatly typed out. That's odd, no return address. Whatever's inside, you hope it's about a new case. It's been almost a year and a half since you solved the case of the missing tea bowl and uncovered a Japanese mafia ring. That case received international attention. So when you and your folks moved back to the States, you had no problem getting detective work. But lately, things have been slow. The highlight of your summer so far was finding a lost cat. Holy cow, Sam exclaims as you rip open the envelope. 20 $100 bills. That was a lot of money in 1982. 20 $100 bills, a plane ticket, and a newspaper clipping slide onto your desk. It looks like a job to me, you say, smiling, and I think it has something to do with this, Sam says, picking up the article. Sam peers over your shoulder as you read the newspaper article. It tells an incredible story about the disappearance of a man named Jim Thompson, sometimes known as the Thai Silk King. You glance back at your paper. So that's the king. What a coincidence that you were reading the very article just as Sam came in with that envelope. It's almost like an omen. You wonder if it's a good one or a bad one. Thompson was an American OSS agent who stayed on in Thailand after the Second World War. It's interesting, I think video gamers probably, and gamers generally know more like what the OSS is, but it was the precursor to the CIA, just, you know, in case. And and the CIA was formed very quickly after the war. Okay. He started a silk-weaving business that grew wildly, far beyond anyone's expectations. In his spare time, Thompson amassed an outstanding collection of Asian art and built a Thai-style house to put it in. He had many friends and entertained frequently. In fact, Jim Thompson led a seemingly charmed life until one fateful day in March 1967, he was vacationing over Easter with friends in the Cameron Highlands in Malaysia when he suddenly disappeared without a trace. Despite an intensive search involving hundreds of volunteers, not a single clue was ever found. Then, last week, 2 photos of a small Thai village market arrived at the offices of the Bangkok Post in an envelope with no return address, and the envelope was postmarked the 1st of March. It was from Chooseco, a Thai city close to the Cambodian border. Turn to the next page. I can't leave for Bangkok before I research the case, you tell Sam, and besides, I have to find out who's sending me on this trip. I don't like the idea of an invisible client. I guess you're right, Sam agrees. I want you to take this entire package down to Sergeant Wimble and ask him to run a fingerprint scan. Even on the money, if you find out anything, I'll be at the library researching the newspaper reports on Thompson's disappearance. You can tell this is dated, right? Like Google. Right, Sam says, darting out the door with the mystery envelope in hand. An hour later, you are down in the cool, quiet stacks of the library, flipping through copies of the Washington Post from spring 1967. Now that could be true, well, probably not today, but it was interesting, like in the 2000s, when we updated this book, a lot of stuff still wasn't scanned. So it's much better now, but you did have to, I mean, there are still like nice, you know, copies of early newspapers in the cool lower levels of libraries everywhere, I'm sure. There are plenty of articles on Thompson. You read in detail about his disappearance and the search afterward, and as the search begins to appear hopeless, the newspaper stories start to introduce various kidnap theories, and it is from one of these articles in mid-April that a whole section has been neatly cut out. You quickly check the edition of the New York Times the same day, and a section of the Thompson article from that paper is also missing. Turn to page 16. Quiet steps approach you from the stairwell. Your pulse quickens. Oh no, someone can't have found out about your discovery yet. You whirl around to face your enemy. It's the librarian. I'm very sorry, she whispers, but the library is about to close for the day. If you'd like to come back tomorrow morning, please come at 9 a.m. You thank her, palm sweating, and leave. Back in your office, you stare at the ceiling, wondering what could have been missing in the articles. If you can find out, you'll be on Thompson's trail. Your thoughts are interrupted by Sam, returning with the mystery envelope. He tells you that the fingerprint scan was empty. As soon as he leaves, the telephone rings. You pick up the receiver. What is it, you say grumpily? Why aren't you on your way to Thailand? A man's voice asks. What? Who are you, you demand? And what right is it of yours to know? I'm the man who just hired you, the voice says calmly. I'm just curious about why you didn't take your flight today. Go on to the next page. I'll tell you why I didn't take my flight, you snap. First, I barely know anything about Thompson. Second, I have the idea that if Thompson didn't vanish in the jungle, the people who kidnapped him aren't going to be that eager to have someone find him out after all this time. And third, I know it's just this funny thing I've got, but I like to meet a client before I go to work for them. You surprise yourself at your strong reaction, and you realize you really care about the case. You wait for the man's response, expecting him to hang up. Turn to page 23. Is anybody getting bored? Okay, sorry. This is kind of like a long time for a setup. Okay, but the man on the phone sounds apologetic. You're right, he said, I should have written a note, but I couldn't. Well, it's a long story. I suppose we could meet as long as we make it look accidental. Where, you demand. The person on the line does sound strange. The man is silent for a minute. The Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. at 9 tomorrow morning. We'll pretend we're tourists to start up a conversation by chance. I'll be wearing a gray suit and carrying a cane. I can't talk any longer goodbye. The line goes dead. Could this be a trap? Why is everything so secret? This client is getting to be as spooky as the case. Maybe you should call the CIA. Explain, AKA the OSS. Explain the situation and ask for a tail at your meeting tomorrow morning. On the other hand, if your client really does have a reason to keep all this secret, calling in the CIA would only mess things up. So, what do? Lincoln Memorial? Call the CIA.
Lincoln Memorial.
I love to live dangerously, I agree. The next day, you travel to Washington, D.C. and go to Lincoln Memorial alone. At 9:05 a.m., an old man wearing a gray suit hobbles up beside you. Pretty impressive, isn't it? The old man said, pointing at the white marble statue of Lincoln. By the way, if you've never been to the Lincoln Memorial, do go. It is spectacular. And go, if you can, at night. I'm not sure it's still open at night, but you look down, you look down the park toward the Washington Memorial. It's subdued light. It's a beautiful sculpture. Highly recommend. Okay, excuse me. Pretty impressive, isn't it? The old man says, pointing at the white marble statue of Lincoln. You nod in agreement. I come here often, he continues in a chatty voice, but my favorite time to come is at night. Ha, I wrote this book. Okay, at night, you ask, surprised? The old man has turned around and is slowly moving away toward the steps. Casually, you do the same. Yes, no one around then. The Washington Monument lit up in the distance. The whole feeling is magic, he replies. By this time, you're out of everyone's earshot, and the old man says, thank you for coming. I'm sure my behavior has seemed rather strange. Frankly, it has, he replied, helping the old man down the steps. Well, now that you're here, I'll be as brief and to the point as possible. My name is Sheldon Truax, he says, extending a firm hand. I was an old friend of Jim Thompson's. So, you were a spy too, you ask? Sheldon Truax pauses and eyes you from head to foot. I can't tell you what I was, but it's of no importance here anyway. Let's just say I was a person Jim Thompson felt he could trust with a dangerous secret. And in March of 1967, Thompson had a very dangerous secret. Turn to page 34. What kind of secret, you ask? Sheldon Truax sighs deeply. That's part of the problem. I'm afraid I never have exactly known. Jim called me a few days before he disappeared and said he had to meet me the following week. He said he needed my advice and possibly my help. Apparently Jim had stumbled upon a smuggling operation going on inside his business. He never said what was being smuggled, but from the sound of it, I guessed it was either heroin or gemstones. Jim Thompson said that he needed a little more information before he could figure out who was behind it, but what he knew so far was enough to scare him. His exact words were, you're not going to believe who's involved in all of this, Sheldon. I suspect it was Ronald Reagan. No, I'm kidding. Had the smugglers realized that Thompson knew, you ask? Jim didn't think so, but he was following his schedule anyway, so no one would get suspicious. He'd made plans for sometime earlier to spend Easter in Malaysia and to continue on to Singapore on business the following week. We had an appointment to get together as soon as he got back to Thailand, and he never did, you finish. Correct, Truax says. Did you have any idea why Jim Thompson called you? Why didn't he just call the police or the CIA? Well, as I told you, I was an old friend in Bangkok on business for a few weeks. At first, it seemed perfectly natural that he should call on me for help. It was only later that I thought it was odd, and by then, I had begun to suspect something else. Turn to page 42. Like what, you ask? Like maybe the CIA itself was somehow involved in the smuggling. You know, we're only going to get to one choice. I'm really sorry this is going on so much. But they treated my information, second choice, they treated my information in an incredibly casual fashion, Truax said. I wasn't the only person who suspected the CIA either. Several people complained about their sloppy attitude toward the entire investigation. What did you do next, you ask? I investigated on my own for 3 whole months. I made some enemies in the process, but I didn't come up with a thing, Truax tells you. Why were you so secretive about hiring me? You ask. Well, I thought you might not accept the assignment if you knew how potentially dangerous it was, Truax responds. I have to admit, it sounds a lot more dangerous than it did at first, you agree, especially since I'll be working alone. Go on to the next page. Sheldon Truax thinks for a minute. Well, I could go with you, I suppose. I can't do any of the field work, of course, he says, pointing to his leg. Bum knee. But I could keep a secret headquarters at the Oriental Hotel and give you what knowledge of the country I have. That might help. I don't know if anyone's been to the Oriental, but this guy's got to be rich. Because it's a nice hotel. Okay, if you decide to accept Sheldon Truax's offer to come with you to Thailand, turn to page 54. If you decide to decline Truax's offer and go to Thailand solo, turn to page 57. Solo. Or with Truax?
Solo.
Okay. Okay, we'll go one more sequence, right? Can you stand this? Are you guys bored out of your minds? Sorry.
You got like,
This is wordy.
you're
Okay.
good, you're good.
Plenty of time.
You have time, Keep going.
You what?
Not even 2 o'clock, we have plenty of time.
Yeah, we can still get to the other one.
I've been reading for 20, I've been talking and reading for 20 minutes. It feels like a lot. Okay.
No, good.
I think it's better if I go to Thailand alone, you tell Sheldon Truax. If the CIA knows I'm working for you, things could get sticky. Besides, I have a good friend who lives in Bangkok. I'm sure she can help. That's fine with me, Sheldon says. Here's my card, call me as soon as you learn anything. I will, you promise. Shaking the old man's hand goodbye. Back at home, you stuff your backpack with a sleeping bag, rain gear, 2 pairs of sneakers, and light loose clothing for the tropics. Before you know it, you're sitting high on the Pacific Ocean in a jumbo jet bound for Bangkok. Staring up at the ceiling, you go over all the elements of the case. Today's newspapers reported that now some of Thompson's searchers seem to be missing. Whoever was involved in Thompson's kidnap, CIA or not, obviously isn't excited at the prospect of seeing him returned alive. You have to be on the lookout for booby traps or false information, but at least you've got one advantage. Nobody ever suspects a kid, you think. Turn to page 66. Yeah, well, I would suspect a kid. My kids, okay. The Oriole Hotel in Bangkok is large and luxurious, right on the banks of the Chao Phraya River. The first thing you do when you get there is call your good friend Ning Tanong. But she isn't in. Her mom tells you Ning has gone to Malaysia and won't be back for a week. You go out on your balcony and watch the action on the river absent-mindedly. Your original plan was to go with Ning to Chooseco, the town that the photos of Thompson were sent from, and ask about him at all the nearby temples. Now you'll have to go alone. Without Ning's extra eyes and ears, it's especially important for you to be wide awake tomorrow. You go back inside your room and order a dinner of marinated beef shish kebab with spicy peanut sauce from room service. Then you go straight to bed. The next morning, the Bangkok Post arrives with breakfast. 2 more people who were searching for Thompson have disappeared, bringing the total missing to 5. Chooseco seems like a dangerous place to be these days. You wish you knew of some other place to start looking. Just then you glance down, and another article catches your eye. Monks to meet in the north. A large convention of Buddhist monks will be taking place this week in the city of Udon Thani. Papers will be given on several aspects of modern-day Hinayana Buddhism. 2 Zen monks from Daitokuji Temple in Kyoto will also attend. They plan to talk on the relationship between Zen meditation and meditation practiced by Thai monks. 2,000 monks from all over the country will be there. After you finish reading the article, a thought flashes through your mind. Maybe Jim Thompson will be there, or at least some monks who knew him. Perhaps you should go to Udon Thani. Okay, that's all I'm gonna read. I mean, I think if you go to Udon Thani, let me pitch it ahead and tell you what happened. So you're not left in awful suspense. You go to Udon Thani, thousands of monks milling around. After checking into a hotel, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Do we die?
Slowly you return to your hotel to wait. It's raining very hard. You glance down at your watch. Somebody had asked you to go to Deng's restaurant. If you go, I'll see what happens if you go to, okay, we finally got to an ending. You approach a cab, idling quietly at the hotel's entrance, taking to Deng's restaurant on Napralon Road, you say. Flood's out that way, you know, the driver answers, but it's okay if we hurry, hop in. The driver speeds along. At some point they told you it was rainy season. The driver speeds along the mud-filled streets and you begin to relax. There's no sign of flooding as far as you can tell. Suddenly, the next street you turn down is covered by a few inches of water. Look out, you exclaim. Your driver turns around. Don't worry, he says, flood's not bad, same every year. You nod uneasily and gaze at the muddy water. Your cab comes to a stop at a light. As you wait, the water level rises several inches. In another minute, it has reached the level of the taxi's electrical system. It shorts out and the engine goes dead. Don't worry, the driver says as he climbs out and opens the hood. You get out to see if you can help, but it's too late. A current of water hurtles up the street, sweeping you away. Your driver, and the cab, along with thousands of others in Udon Thani, you become a casualty of the worst floods in the history of the region. The end. Any questions? Like, not about the book, but like, any questions about like how to write one of these things? How do you come up with all these ideas? Yeah.
So when it tells you to go to a different page, but you're not actually making a choice, is that like intentional, or is that just a formatting thing?
That's a formatting thing. Something that we've done with the second generation is that we are putting the map of the book on the back. It's not without the numbers, but the little squares are endings, the circles are choice points, and the tiny little arrow icons are pages. And so, like you can see that like some of these are long sequences and they'll be punctuated by art. Something that we do when we're, like the map is an essential part of the Choose Your Own Adventure writing process. And so as soon as you, like when a writer, by contract, a writer has to hand in a manuscript with a map and with numbering. And then that like map is, it goes through several iterations and obviously the layout changes because the manuscripts are usually 85 to 100 pages and these are 144 pages long. About 15 pages of that is back matter and front matter. Things like the copyright page and the title page and things like that. But like we go through that map and make sure that the illustrations are evenly spaced. So, I mean, instead of like, you know, sometimes there'll be like 12 great illustrations, but it's one storyline. And we only do about 40 illustrations per book. So we actually like star the pages and we figure out some interesting, you know, some interesting image. And then when the designer, the production, you know, designer actually laying the book out gets that map and gets those images, and there's notes on the pages saying, okay, there's a full page illustration, or there's a double half page illustration, like goes along the top or the bottom. The designer adjusts all the page numbers, and that's why there's turn twos, right? It's like, that's a long-winded way of explaining. Yes, there has to be turn twos, like it can't just be page after page. We are moving into adult, we're starting to do some adult books, like books for adults, and this is something that we're like going to be grappling with. We've actually already talked about it because the stories are longer. You know, they're more like, I mean, they're longer overall. The distance between choices, there has to be a certain velocity of choice, but yeah, how much text you can ask people to read before making a choice, that's something that we're gonna figure out. Okay, I'm gonna do another one, but I'm gonna do a short one. I have just because it'll go faster, and like jump in anytime if you want to read. Okay, so here guys, I think all the little kids have gone. Lake Monster Mystery, Ghost Island. No wait, yeah, Ghost Island.
Ghost Island.
Wait, okay, you look like you might be the last little one. Youngish, you're probably older, you're probably like 11. Are you 11?
Yeah, Ghost Island. Yeah.
Okay,
I'm 10.
okay, you're 10. Okay, almost 11. What would you read here?
I'd say Ghost Island.
This one or this one?
Ghost.
Ghost, okay, Ghost Island. I actually like this, this is my favorite book I've written. You have to do a lot of travel when you write a Choose Your Own Adventure. Vacation is finally here. This year you and your parents are sailing around the Caribbean Sea. You and your two best friends from school, Jamie and Meg, have been invited along too. Almost every day you sail to a new island. For 3 nights your boat is anchored at English Harbor on the island of Antigua. As soon as you get there, the 3 of you head straight for the beach to play with the island kids. What's it like around here, you ask them. One of them answers, it's pretty nice, but whatever you do, don't go near the old cemetery on the hill after dark. It's haunted. Old folks say the ghost of English Harbor lives there. Another kid says people go in there at night and they never come out. I used to love things like that when I was a kid. Okay, turn to page 3. You watch as the kids leave. I wonder if they're telling the truth, Meg says. Well, I believe in ghosts, Jamie says. So do I, Meg agrees. Ghosts? You laugh? You two must be kidding. Turn to the next page. No, we're not, Jamie says. You're so sure that there's no ghost of English, if you're so sure there's no ghost of English Harbor, why don't you go to the cemetery tonight to find out? We dare you. You look at your 2 friends. Tonight, you ask? Meg and Jamie nod. Okay, you say boldly, I'll go. Would you do that? Would you do this if your friends asked you to do it? Would you go, like, spend the night in a cemetery by yourself?
No.
I wouldn't either. I would get ghost or no ghost, right? Okay, turn to page 6. Page 6. That night, you wait until your parents are asleep. Of course, you're hiding this from mom and dad. Then the 3 of you sneak out of bed and go up on deck. You're in a boat. Okay, right, that's right. You stare at the inky black water with a weak feeling in your stomach. What if Meg and Jamie are right? It's too late to back out now. Maybe you could just pretend to go to the cemetery. You could tell them, you could hide somewhere for a few hours and tell them you went. Ha! Lying. Encouraging lying. But wait a minute, what are you thinking? There are no such thing as ghosts. Or is there? If you decide to go to the cemetery, even though you're kind of scared, turn to page 8. If you decide to hide someplace for a few hours and make up a story about the ghost for Jamie and for Meg, turn to page 13. Okay, what's that?
Yeah, I
Go to the cemetery. Okay.
Cemetery.
You're gonna go to the cemetery even though you're scared. You're going to the cemetery. Ghost or no ghost, you whisper goodbye to Jamie and Meg, then you lower your raft into the dark water and paddle toward the beach across the bay. When you get there, you hide the raft in some bushes. You can see the old path up the hill. The cemetery is at the top. Turn to page 11. You feel a bit scared. The bushes and trees look like huge, scary insects, but at least the moon is bright. You walk along briskly, everything is very quiet. All of a sudden, you hear a laugh coming from behind a clump of bushes. You stop to listen. There's something strange about the laughter. It has an echo. If you go to see where the laughter is coming from, turn to page 18. If you screw up your courage and continue on to the cemetery, turn to page 34. This is a good choice. And let me just say why. It's a good choice because it's like distinctly different things, and both of them are pretty interesting. So it'd be pretty interesting to go continue on, but hearing an echo in the middle of like the open forest is sort of weird. So what, I mean, to me that would mean it's a cave or something. So, okay, so cave, no, I actually don't know if it's a cave. I don't remember. But if you, okay, so if you want to go see where the laughter is from, we go to 18. If you want to go continue to the cemetery, 34.
Laughter.
Okay, raise your hands, laughter, going after the laughter. Okay, it's the laughter. You peek quickly around the bushes. There's a dark, narrow cave. Ha! Here I am, it's probably 30 years since I wrote this thing, and I'm thinking the same way. Okay, there's a dark, narrow cave in the side of the hill. The laughter is coming from inside. Maybe you've discovered someone's hideout. You take a step into the cave to listen more closely. Inside it's pitch dark. You feel oddly light, as if you're floating. You try to walk, but there's no ground under your feet. Then, thunk, you feel the earth under your feet again. You run out of the cave. It's daylight. Wait, what just happened? Only a minute ago it was night. Did you fall asleep? Turn to page 21. I actually like this. I like this branch. Okay. You look down at the harbor, but all the boats are gone. All the buildings have disappeared too. In the distance, you can see Mount Obama, the tallest mountain on Antigua. That is a true thing, by the way. They changed the name. At least you're on the same island, but why has everything changed? Turn to the next page. Suddenly you hear more laughter. This time it's closer. You turn around. The noise is coming from a small group of men down on the beach. Their skin is painted bright red. Their black hair is long, shiny, and flowing. They have huge black circles painted around each eye, and they look very powerful. If you go up to the men and ask them to explain where you are, turn to page 37. If you keep quiet to watch what they do next, turn to page 38. Okay, what do you think?
37.
37, you're gonna go up to the men and ask them what they're doing. Okay, here we go. You start to run down the hill toward the men, but you trip over some vines and hit your head. The next thing you know, you're waking up inside a thatched hut. An old man and two old women kneel on the ground next to you. Look, one of them says, the god is awake. Okay, it's just my dream, like my dreams, the woman said. For many nights I dreamed a new god would come. What's going on here, you think? These people seem to think you're a god. Turn to page 67. I would have loved that. As a kid. I think I thought I was God, but okay, you sit up. Wait a minute, you say, I'm no God. I'm just a kid. Now, I don't know who you are or where I am, but I do know I have to get home fast or my parents are going to kill me. Can you help? The old man smiles strangely. I know the way you came, he said. You have been sent to us by the gods. To let you go would make them very angry. No, you must stay with us. You don't know why or what is happening, but you're beginning to think it will be a long while before you see your parents again. The end. Okay, like based on that, I don't even know what to say next. Like, does anyone want to ask me about writing one of these things? Like, any questions about like the history of the series? Yes.
You mentioned a good choice. Did you play test the maps? And like, do you know analytically, statistically, where do people go? And
well, this is really an interesting question. When you're learning to write a choose your own adventure, you start to understand that you begin to understand that you have to avoid choices that are not compelling, and the best choices are equally compelling, which is why I pointed out that one choice, right? Like, it was sort of two interesting things to do, and there wasn't a really obvious, what you don't want is like an obvious choice, an obvious way to go. The other interesting thing though is that when you do test, we don't always, but sometimes we do, we have in the past, just to sort of see, like let's scientifically try to look at what makes a good choice. The choices that almost 50% of the respondents like both choose, like 49 and 50, those are the best choices. It's not a good choice if even 55% of the people choose, like always choose one way. It's just like there's something wrong with that choice. It's out of balance. It's somehow indicating to the reader that they should go in one direction and not the other. So excellent question, and you try to make them as good as you can, and you avoid something that we work with when we're training a new writer, because everybody needs, even like really good writers with a lot of experience tend to need to learn how to write it because it's such a different genre, is which way choices. Avoid which way choices. You don't get down, like if you were running down the hill here and you came to a fork, go left or go right, that's a which way choice. That's not a good choice because it doesn't matter which way you choose. I mean, you have no agency, really. I mean, obviously you can choose, but like it doesn't matter which way you choose because you don't know what is weighing. Whereas by introducing the idea of laughter and people on the beach, you're kind of like the sound of laughter that you can't see, like you're kind of like, these are two different things and they give you two things to consider. Yeah, you could go left or you could go right, but yeah, it's a good question. Yes?
When you're writing, do you start with a choice map, or do you kind of develop that as you're going along? And then also, do you write it one through line and then go back and do one through line?
Okay, yeah. Okay, good, more good questions. Everybody's a little different. I got a very funny story about Ray Montgomery. He would do a map, okay? He'd write it out. And the manuscripts, as I said, tend to be about 85 to 100 pages, but like you tend to write, you don't write full pages. So, you know, like let's say there's 100 pages, and Ray would use up the numbers 1 through 100 on this map. Like, and they look like these maps. They look like reverse tennis ladders, right? The way you start with the winner, and you go out. Anyway, like he came in once, I was working and like we were both writing, and he comes in and he goes, I'm at this point in the story, and he's describing it, and he goes, and I need a choice. And I'm like, well, why? And he goes, well, because that's where the map has a branch. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And that's how he wrote, right? Some people, I have talked to writers who, experienced choose writers, who write they write one, let's say you come to the first choice, and they write to the next choice in one part of the map, and then they go to the other choice and they write to that next choice point, and then they go back to that second choice and they write like one of those out to the choice point, and then they write, so like they kind of like, it's like embroidery or something, they just do like bit by bit. And then there are people that go all the way to the end. I myself would sort of create a map, but with pencil, with the idea that I was going to erase it, and I'd be writing, and I would write a branch, because like the branches tend to be sections of the manuscript or book where you're going like to a general physical place. Like in case of the Silk King, you go to Udantani, and that would be a branch. And so I'd figure out all of the consistencies and stuff in the branch. There's not many rules in Choose Your Own Adventure, but one of the big ones is consistent universe. And so there's two things going on when you're writing, it's the choice of location and chronological time. So what you have to make sure is that you're kind of keeping track of both, and you couldn't have something happen like in one branch and then not go down another branch and not have it happen there, right? I mean, if it's flooding in Udantani, it's flooding in Udantani. And it doesn't mean that you're like in another branch of that section of the map or that section of the story, there's no flooding, or you manage to, you might take a different road and different path to the temple or the Dong's restaurant or whatever, but you are, so you wouldn't die, you wouldn't get washed away in the flood, but it has to be consistent. So I hope that answers your question. Yes?
So you've been doing this for a while,
Yeah.
and now there's a wide audience that hasn't experienced.
Could you use the microphone? It's really hard to
Oh, there's a microphone right there. Thank you. I meant to ask if I guess we moved into Q&A, so.
So you've been doing this for a while, and the audience is now somewhat experienced doing this. Over that time, both like culturally, like things have changed to a certain degree, so decision making is impacted by that to a certain degree. Have you guys observed a change in the way people go through these over that time?
The way they go through a book?
Yeah, the way they go through the Choose adventures.
Okay, so you're talking about how they would go through a single story, or how they go through the, okay.
Yeah, so like, if you took the first Choose you wrote, and presented it to some of your early audiences versus people today, have you noticed that people would go through it differently now?
Okay, I don't know if I've ever, I don't know if I've detected a real difference. When we started to relaunch the series in 2005, 6, because we were preparing the books in 2005, we decided to update where we could, and we did change things like using a payphone versus using a cell phone, things like that. In that sense, I mean, I'm not sure that, I mean, to me that, but I don't think that led to people using the books any differently. I do know, we have noticed that, that certain titles seem more popular than others. And I think it's titles that are not dated, that are not as dated. And, but it's like slight, the difference is slight. I mean, the thing about a series like this is that they all the books kind of sell pretty well, all the backlist books. Frontlist always sells better because you get better orders like from lots of places that will take a new book, but they won't keep it in stock year in, year out. But do people read them differently? I'm sure they read them differently. I'm sure they do. And it's got to, somebody asked at San Diego, somebody said, well, where do you see yourself on the spectrum of video games? Like where, and I was just like, wow, I don't really think about where, I mean, I think we're stuck in print. Like, we're devoted to print, and like, I believe in the written word, and I think that that's a really helpful place to be, part of your time, part of your entertainment time. And I think literacy is super important. And it is, as Ray said originally, a stealth reading program. But anyway, I'll think on that more. Thank you. Yes?
Hi, you mentioned something about a consistent universe within the books. Does that mean Choose Your Own Adventure has its own consistent universe within the series of books?
No, not at all. It's just book by book.
Book by book.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi.
I'm wondering how you handle early choices that radically change the story. So do you end up with like a branch where it's actually almost an entire tree off of it, or do you have ways and techniques of bringing the narrative back together to unify it, to make more of the story available for early choices? And I guess sort of a second question about that is, how does that play into the player having a sense, or the reader having a sense of agency over what the story is going to be for them in the end?
Yeah, I heard what you're saying. Okay, so did everybody hear that question about when you're making that choice, like at what point, how do you handle that stuff? Okay, there's a problem, okay, and it kind of goes back to consistent universe. You're trying to make the opening of the book as filled with stakes, high stakes kinds of problems as you can. And you don't want to, one thing you don't want to avoid is having an ending too soon. Because if you have an ending too soon, it kind of cuts you off, and then you go back and it almost feels like the book really starts at the other branch, because that's really where you started to go in different directions. I think that that the problem okay, so let's say you make a good first choice and you've got two strong kind of directions to go. You can loop back in, but it's very complicated, because what you've got to do is make sure that where you loop into a different storyline, that nothing has happened in that storyline that's referred to that didn't happen Like, in other words, if something happened in that storyline, it has to happen in the storyline you're sort of jumping ship. So in the maps, if you go down to the, if you see a bunch of chooses in a bookstore, or you go down to the our booth on the second floor, we do the dotted lines when a branch on the map, when you jump from one branch to another, we do a dotted line. So you can see, and they're kind of like a parlor trick. The book that does this the most is Balloon to the Sahara by Doug Turman. And I mean, it was like, I think Doug was just entertaining himself, or he was doing a lot of drugs or something. It was like I mean, like it just goes all over the place. You're like, but it all makes sense, right? Like, like when I saw the map, I was like, this can't, and I like was like, wait, this really, like, it's all hangs together, and it does. But yeah, so people do that, and I think it's a really interesting way of extending the story. But it is tricky and hard to do as a writer, and make, like, have enough detail and enough, like, kind of weighted activity, action in a branch, and not have it, like, have to, like, you know, where you run into a conflict further down. Thank you. Yes.
Do authors ever hide, like, hidden chapters that are, like, off the beaten path?
There's a very famous hidden chapter, and it's in a book that we just got the rights to called Inside UFO 5440. And it's a very famous ending of Utopia, and the only way you can get there is by jumping. And you have to figure this out. So you have to kind of read the whole book and figure out, you have not gotten to one, there's a page you haven't gotten to. And like the insight is, like, you jump there. And it's kind of like the leap of faith, the Parthian leap, like, right? Like, you're just like, okay, like, I'm just gonna go for it. And that has been used in a few other books as well. Great question. Hi.
Hi. So you talked about good choices being almost essentially 50-50. Given that some choices lead to some pretty catastrophic events in Choose Your Owns, I was thinking back to, like, D&D and RPGs. Sometimes you'll get the wink wink nudge nudge from your dungeon master to go certain ways. Are those inherently, you think, detrimental to Choose Your Owns, or?
You mean getting a wink?
Yeah.
Detrimental? You know, that was actually a big thing for Ray and Ed both, like, not to give the wink.
Okay.
You know, to really let, and another thing was that it's sometimes, like, you do the right thing, like, you don't lie, and bad things happen, because guess what?
That is a fact.
That happened, like, that's real life. So to make it highly, like, morally causal, moral, whatever, you know, to make, like, everything a happy ending when you do everything right, like, no, right? The same way you gotta jump to that ending in UFO 5440, like, you know, you're on your own.
I like that, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you've seen any of the Netflix experiments with interactive fiction like Bandersnatch.
Yes, yes. In fact, I sued Netflix over Bandersnatch. But it had to do with trademark. I had no problem with Bandersnatch itself. I thought it was very well executed. The best instance, there's a couple of very good instances of, like, I think very well executed interactive stories that don't have a game criteria, and one of them is called, I believe it's on Twitch, or that's one of the places you can see it, and it's called
The Dark Room?
No, I've not heard of that. It's called Night Shift, and it's really pretty brilliant. It's a story about a kid who is a young guy in school, and he is the kind of the attendant in a parking lot with very fancy cars in London, and a car is stolen, and like while he's on watch, and he kind of goes after it, trying to get the car back, and mayhem ensues, and it's actually very, very well done. And it was created by a bunch of people from the American, who graduated in the same class at American Film Institute. That film is probably about, I don't know, it's probably about 7 or 8 years old now. That's an excellent, you know, and again, great choices. And those guys figured out the same thing, that question about even like 50-50, like they did testing for every single choice. And sometimes it had to do with how they worded the choice. They could just, but a few times they had to reshoot because, yeah, it was very interesting. The film was made in the service of a piece of technology that was licensed. It was getting queued up to be installed in theaters nationwide, and then COVID hit. So, but it's a very good example of it, and I keep thinking eventually when they solve the streaming problem and all that stuff that, you know, you've got to have a pretty instant like response to a choice, like when you're streaming, and that involves dual streaming, which is a real trick. And anyway, so, but that's a whole other question. That's like a technology question, yeah.
It seems like it should be a no-brainer, but they've only done like 4, and
I
I've never been able
know.
to figure out why.
I know, it's interesting, they've been very brave, much braver than any of the other streamers in like doing innovative content, and I don't think they get enough credit for that. I don't think that, they've done great work. Thank you, thanks for asking.
Hello,
Hi.
I was wondering, what is like your design process for writing like bad ends in like Choose books? And like trying to motivate people to like keep going or explore more different pathways. Also, as like a side thing, what is your favorite bad end that you have written?
The one where Donald Trump dies. Okay, you know, it's interesting, with endings, because there used to be this sort of joke around The Office. This is like, when I say The Office, I mean the metaphorical, like the community of editors and writers that was working on Choose Your Own Adventure in the 80s, in sort of the first generation. And that was you know, there was like, the universe was like 60% good and 40% bad. And you should count up the endings and make sure that 40% of the endings were bad. Not that they ended in death, but they were negative endings. I think that, I mean, that's an interesting question. Like, write it in a way that makes you want to continue. I don't think anyone really wants to end a book by dying. So I do think that keeps people going. And have you ever seen, there's a very funny scene in an early Family Guy where he's reading a Choose Your Own Adventure under the covers, and he's trying to keep his fingers in all the endings so that when he avoids, like to avoid the death endings, he's like, oh, you know, I died, you know, it's just very cute. Like, in it, I think it harkens to like exactly what you're talking about, like, you know, going down. And my favorite death ending, gosh, nothing really. It's funny reading, like, I don't think I've read Case of Smoking in 15 years, but and I remember that ending. I was actually caught in a flood in Thailand once in a car, and it was coming in, the water was coming into the car, and the car had conked out. And I'm like, wow, this could go south really quick. And luckily, it sort of stopped rising, and we got out and walked to high ground, and it was fine. But that's closer than I come to death most of the time. I mean, you know, maybe closer than I've gotten to death, like knock on wood, like you know, so far. But there's nothing that really, not one that really. I think the ones that like kind of catch you by surprise and are kind of funny are the best death endings. Not that you should make fun of death, but that like in the spirit of Choose, like it's kind of like you die because you can come back, like, right? It's like different. So anyway, thank you. Anything else? Any other questions? You guys are welcome to come by the booth and introduce yourselves and say hi and ask, maybe you're too shy like me, believe it or not, I am shy. And ask any other questions you would like about the series. And thanks for coming. Thank you for supporting the series.